Welcome to Pretty Lies and Alibis. Let's seek the truth and travel the long road to justice together. What you know, Alibiers? Welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi. Hope you're having a great Saturday wherever you are. I can't complain so far. If you're watching on YouTube, you know the drill. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, share it with your friends, and you can ring my bell if you want notifications. Just click on that little bell icon and it will let you know whenever I upload new content. Music fact of the day, the song, I guess that's why they call it The Blues by Elton John, had an amazing harmonica solo by none other than the great Stevie Wonder. So I just finished up watching day one of testimony, got my notes all set. There were 3 witnesses that testified after openings on Monday. Tomorrow, we'll go through day 2. That way, come Monday, we're all caught up, ready to go for a new day of testimony. I'm going to play some footage while I'm doing the first witness's testimony. Now, the person that you're going to see on screen testifying is not Officer LaFleur. It's the second witness. We'll get to him in a bit. They did not show Officer LaFleur's body cam footage due to the fact that he walked in the church while Miss Hutchins was still on the ground and being tended to by first responders. Also, Alex Capriello from News Nation is in the courtroom. He is live tweeting this trial as it happens. I'm going to put a link to his Twitter in the description. He's able to tell us what is seen on screen because we can only hear. So I'm going to use some of his tweets to kind of fill in those gaps of what's actually happening. The first witness is Officer Nicholas LaFleur. He was the first officer on scene. He parked in front of the church and they play his body cam. LaFleur asks for a medevac. He goes to his car, gets a trauma kit, and also an oxygen kit. Alex tweeted, "You can see Miss Hutchins on the floor, moving her head back and forth. There are 3 people around her. The EMS says that Miss Hutchins was shot in the chest. People are also with the director, Joel Souza, as well." It's obviously very chaotic and you hear a lot of things going on at once. Officer LaFleur is talking to dispatch, updating on what's happening. They put a mask on Miss Hutchins and you can hear the director just shouting out in pain. They're telling Miss Hutchins to take deep breaths and people are saying her name over and over. Off camera, you hear someone shout for everybody to stop what they're doing, that this is now a crime scene. This will be the second witness. By the way, in this video, when you see somebody testifying, it is not Officer LaFleur. It is the second witness. I didn't want you guys to get confused. They put Miss Hutchins on a stretcher and then into an ambulance. They're planning on giving her IV fluids and trying to get her stable before they medevac her out. They have called for a medevac at this point. You hear LaFleur say there's a gunshot wound under the right arm, which went straight through and out the back on her left side. That same projectile hit the director in the shoulder. LaFleur explains he started to gather people to figure out where they were going to go to be interviewed. That was pretty much the extent of his work on set that day. On cross-exam by the defense, they ask if his role as the first responding officer is to preserve evidence. He said his primary goal was to preserve life, then investigate and preserve evidence. He explains there were only 3 of them on scene at that point. They wanted to find out who all was in the church and witnessed the shooting and keep them in one area. The defense points out that one supervisor said this is a crime scene. It's important to take steps to preserving testimony. The defense points out that tainting can be accidental. People are just sharing their version of events of what they saw. Sometimes it can be purposeful, just in general, and the officer said definitely a possibility. And the defense reiterates that's why it's important to separate witnesses. Officer LaFleur said with limited space surrounded by movie equipment and just 3 deputies on scene, they were just limited as to where they could put people. The defense asked if he could have told people to stand apart with all the open space they had. And the officer said, again, there's only 3 officers on scene. He was just trying to keep them all in his sight. He did ask them to stop talking. Well, the defense asked if that was heard on the body cam. He said the body cam is redacted in spots. He was able to find out who was in the church when the shooting occurred. There were 12 people total, including Alec Baldwin. Everybody else was part of the crew that was working on that blocking. The defense brings up the officer initially said 3 to 4 people were in the church, but after he talked to people who were on scene, they came up with that list of 12. The defense talks about not separating the witnesses and if it should have happened a different way. The officer says if we're Monday morning quarterbacking, ideally, he would have placed cuffs on everybody and put them in separate cars, but they had limited resources. The defense talks about his pretrial interview in the case, and the defense said, "You told my investigator you would deal with that scene differently." The officer agrees. He said the more training he's received, it showed him different ways he could have handled things. By the way, he was very new to the force when this happened, from what I gather from his testimony. The defense asked when Officer LaFleur approached Alec Baldwin, he was on a cell phone, and asked, "Did you ask him to stay off of his phone?" The officer said yes, but that was not in the body cam video. The officer didn't take his phone, and he said at that point in his career, he wasn't knowledgeable enough to secure cell phone devices. They bring up an attorney for the production company was on set. The officer heard the attorney asking people what they saw. He said he's never been at a crime scene where an attorney shows up before the police do and start asking questions. The defense asked why he didn't take steps to stop that when he saw it. He said he wasn't reading anybody Miranda rights, but with more training, he realizes he should have stopped the attorney from talking to the witnesses. On redirect by the state, they ask if you need a warrant to search a cell phone. He says yes. The defense objects and said, "We asked about seizing and not searching." The state asked if the officer had a warrant to seize Alec Baldwin's cell phone, and he said no. He said he's never been to a crime scene with 200 witnesses either. The next witness is Tim Benavides. He's a retired lieutenant from Santa Fe Sheriff's Office. He was the day manager on the day the shooting occurred. He said as soon as they got to set, it was just chaos. There were people everywhere. He was directed to the church where the shooting happened. He made contact with a corporal who came in about the same time he did. When he arrived, it was only Deputy LaFleur before they got there. There was no way to effectively separate the witnesses with only 3 deputies on scene. So their first priority was to find out how the victims were, and also fire personnel were telling them to help with the helicopter. They were trying to keep people together as much as possible. Once they found the victims were being helped by medical personnel, their focus shifted to finding the firearm that was used in the shooting. They show his body-worn camera, which is, if you're on YouTube, that's what you're seeing now. He's talking to dispatch and says they're going to secure the film and all the crew members, meaning what was being filmed the moment the shooting happened. I thought that was actually a very smart move for him, just to think of that. He said he had 200 people out there on that set, and he walks to the set and you hear him say, "I need everybody to stop what they're doing. This is a crime scene." And the officer says he needs to secure that film. You see the crew member walk off, obviously, to do that. He never found out if there was video of the actual shooting. On his body-worn cam, you hear the director just yelling in pain, lots of talking. You hear first responders counting 1, 2, 3, as if they're lifting the director, I assume, on the stretcher. He yells to someone that he needs pictures right away of the crime scene. He knew he was wearing his camera, but he also wanted to preserve anything he could. He said it was not easy with this crime scene. At this point in his footage, he's inside the church. He asks where the props person is. A crew member says they've cleared the prop gun, and the crew member walked him to where it is. You can still hear the director screaming in the background. You see him walk to a cart where 2 guns are laying. They weren't the guns used in the scene when the shooting happened. He walks up to a woman and says he needs to know where the gun is right now. She points and yells for the armorer, which is Hannah, who is the defendant in this case, saying that she needs to know where the gun is. We see Hannah come on camera. Somebody's standing with her, and the officer asks, "How do you know this is the gun?" She said, "That's the gun." The officer walks Hannah to the car. Hannah was also telling him about the ammunition. Hannah asked another crew member if they have the rounds she gave them, and they said that they're on the cart. Then she says, "Are they?" She asked another person, "Who did you give them to?" They say, "Back to you." Hannah hesitates and says, "I didn't." And then a crew member says, "I'll get them." The prosecutor asks why the officer let the crew member go collect the rounds. Again, he said he only had 3 deputies on scene. They were just trying to control their part of the crime scene. He was taking care of the firearm at the time, and he was keeping his eye on the crew member who was going to get that ammunition. The crew member brought that props cart to him, and it looked the same as when he passed by it before. It was really messy. There were 2 guns on that, so he cleared the gun that Baldwin had and then secured that in the front of his cruiser. There was no ammunition in the firearm when he got it. Hannah has her hand on her head and keeps saying, "Oh my God, are they okay?" They roll the props cart to the officer. Hannah is becoming increasingly nervous. Another crew member says, "We have rounds here." Hannah grabs a box from the cart. She says she's pretty sure this is the box that the rounds came out of. She's very nervous and she apologizes and says she's scared. She's crying, and then she said, "This is the box I got them out of." The officer took the 2 boxes of rounds off the table. At this point, Hannah's just getting more upset. The officer tells her to relax and asks someone to get her some water. She's starting to kind of hyperventilate at this point. You hear the officer say the helicopter is here. Hannah covers her mouth and says something about entry wounds and asks if Miss Hutchins is okay. At this point, she really starts to break down. The officer says they're trying to stabilize Miss Hutchins before they fly out. The officer also asks 2 people standing around who they are. It's really windy. You can't make out a lot of what they say. But Hannah, in the meantime, is saying, "Oh my God." There's also another crew member who is breaking down. A male looks to be hyperventilating, and the officer asks someone to get this crew member some water. A woman walks up and introduces herself. She said her and her husband own that ranch. She said something about insurance, and the officer said, "I'm not worried about insurance. I'm worried about her life." The lady says, "Oh, absolutely," and says something you really just can't make out. Then she asks what she can do to help. He tells her there's a lot of units coming due to the amount of people on the set. And she said, "We're trying to clear them out." And the officer says, "No, everybody stays where they are." He tells Hannah he's going to have her sit in the back of his police cruiser. She asked if she's arrested, and he said no. But since you're the armorer, they're going to want to talk to you more than anyone else. He asked her to get in the car with the scene being so active. And her being the armorer, he did not want her walking off and him losing sight of her. Hannah is sobbing. She's asking for water. He yells for another deputy to have a medical unit come check out Hannah. Due to the fact she was hyperventilating, he didn't want her to pass out, and then they have a bigger problem on their hands. At this point, the officer is on with dispatch updating about the medevac and the director. He instructs the sheriff's office to send someone to St. Vincent's Hospital, where the victims will be taken to so they can stay up to date on their conditions. Also, they're going to need to gather evidence such as their clothing. He also thought there could still be projectiles in their bodies that ultimately would need to be retrieved. Deputy LaFleur, the previous witness, comes up to him and says that Baldwin was the shooter and he had more witnesses to the shooting from inside the church. The officer says that's okay. We know where he is and who he is. And then he asks if Baldwin is in his trailer. LaFleur says yes. The officer tells LaFleur to keep Baldwin away from everybody else. Now, at that point, a 4th deputy shows up on scene. They were just all making sure that Baldwin was separate from everybody else. The witness is talking on the phone to a detective. He relays that Alec Baldwin pulled the trigger. The officer informs the detective he does have the weapon, the ammunition, and the armorer. He recounts what he knows so far about what happened in the church. Someone from the crew walks up and said Alec is going to smoke a cigarette and then sit in his own car. He points Alec's car out to the officer. The witness goes back to the police car where Hannah is, and a crew member is sitting in there with her. He asks Hannah if she's okay. She says no, then starts crying. You can hear her crying as he walks away. The witness yells to a paramedic that he needs someone to check on Hannah and says she's having a panic attack. He sees someone who was possibly a witness in the church and asks them to go see one of the other deputies. A crew member also points out one of the camera operators who was inside that church. The man asks if he can go to the hospital, and the deputy says not yet. He tells a crew member he's looking for the person who helped point out everyone who was inside the church when the shooting happened. The crew member said they can help with that. They said whoever he's looking for, it's not her set, it's mine. They ask who the person is with them. There's a woman standing next to this crew member, and the witness is informed that is the attorney. The crew member starts to point out to the witness who people are that are standing around. The witness tells the attorney he'll be with her in a little bit. At this point, we got more deputies arriving, putting the number of law enforcement on scene at this point at 6. The witness is trying to have them secure as much of the scene as they can. They point out that Halyna is still on scene. They're trying to stabilize her before medevac takes her. He establishes an entry point for anyone else who is arriving, and they need to check in. The med unit was asking what weapon was used. He's also showing other officers that prop cart. He mentions he is a lawyer here already as well. The witness asked if Hannah's okay to another crew member, and the person says yes. The witness has the 2 ammo boxes in his hand from the cart. At this point, a crew member reaches over the police tape and grabs a bullet off of that prop cart and shakes it to see if it's a dummy round. He says it is. The witness puts the ammo boxes in the front seat of his cruiser, and he's asked if he had any reason to believe that someone tampered with the cart, planted evidence, or got into his cruiser and messed with the evidence. He said no. The witness walks up to the lawyer and the person who says it's their set. The lawyer said she's trying to find out where people are being interviewed at. The witness says the detectives are on their way. The lawyer asked if the interviews have started yet, and he says no. He tells her he's going to check on the victim. He'll get back to her and let her know how the victim's doing. He pops up into the ambulance. You see them working on Halyna. The paramedic says she is critical but stable, and they're going to fly her out. The witness instructs the new deputies to separate everyone, and also nobody's leaving. He said that's why he's called more units, because there's just people everywhere. Someone from the crew did leave, and the state asked if that was someone who witnessed the shooting or a crew member. He doesn't remember, but that one person did leave. He goes back to tell the attorney that Miss Hutchins is alive and stable, but critical. They're trying to stabilize her further so that they can get her medevaced out of there. A crew member asked if they could move Hannah from the back of the police cruiser to another car so that she's more comfortable. The witness says yes, as long as he could see the vehicle, and they would post a deputy to be with her. Now, on cross, really, I think the tactic here is going to be just questioning the integrity of how they secured this crime scene, which really is impossible with 3 deputies, 200 witnesses, 2 victims still on scene. It's chaos. She has very good attorneys. I will say that. They do a very good job of picking apart what they can. The defense attorney asked if preservation of a crime scene is important. Obviously, the witness says yes. He said he managed the scene as best he could given the evolving scene. The defense replays some of that body cam video and says you had 3 deputies to work with initially. The witness says yes, but additional deputies arrived about 30 minutes later. The witness is asked about dispatch logs. They pull that up on screen, and it shows the time officers are dispatched to scenes and then also what time they arrive. The defense points out that Deputy LaFleur was dispatched at 1:49 and arrived at 2:02 p.m. The witness on the stand arrived at 2:20. The defense points out 5 other units arrived at the same time he did and asked if he's sure they only had 3 deputies to work with. And the witness says ultimately he isn't sure where they were, but when he got there, there were only 3 on scene. After additional deputies arrived, he's asked if he could have separated the witnesses. And he said he was just trying to process the scene and direct people where they were needed. The defense asked why it's important to separate witnesses. And he said it's important to separate witnesses because they start talking. And then the defense just finishes the question for him and says it can affect the integrity of their observations. The defense asked who figured out where to put the crime scene tape and asked how they determined what the crime scene was. He said the other 2 deputies placed the tape. They knew that the shooting happened inside the church. The defense says when you put up the tape, you make sure all the important evidence is inside the parameter. Then the defense points out a black tent in the background. He said there were witnesses that walked up to it, and then they play a clip from his body cam again. At this point, they're back inside the church. The crew member says he has the gun that was used. They walk by the tent, and the defense points out a truck that was across from the tent. That truck was not within the crime scene tape. So the defense asked the witness if they looked in that truck, and the witness says he didn't think they had a reason to. They show a photo of Baldwin with equipment in the background. They point out that white truck is seen outside the crime scene tape, and the witness agrees it is. The defense says if evidence would have been in that truck, it could have been compromised. And the witness says, I don't know if it would have been. The defense says it's not a secure area. People can go in and out of that truck. He said after he was dispatched, it took about 16 minutes for him to get there. It's a very remote area. He's asked what was going on before they arrived. The witness is like, I don't know. But really what the defense is doing here is they're moving this in the direction that obviously it took a while for anybody to get there initially. And that's a lot of time for things to be compromised, hidden, moved around. The defense has the witness explain chain of custody to the jury. So obviously the first person to get it is the first chain, and then how you pass it off to the evidence department, and then so forth. All of that's documented. You don't want to break in the chain of custody, and you never want evidence unattended. The defense says you had a crew member collect the prop cart, mentions it being back near that black tent. And the defense asked if the witness should have done that himself. He said he watched the guy, and the defense attorney says, could you see if someone took something off the cart or put something on the cart? Then the defense points out the witness is wearing glasses and asked about his vision. The witness says, my vision's pretty good. They play another clip from the body cam. This is when he's first talking to Hannah, and the defense asks if at that point the witness can see the prop cart. And he says yes. The defense isn't convinced, and they ask how. The witness says, well, you're looking at this through my body cam, which is a straight shot. Obviously, he had a broader view with his own eyes. They play more video where Hannah's asking if the victims are okay. And then again, the defense asked if at this point the witness had visual contact of the cart. He said he was able to keep an eye on both Hannah and the cart. The defense says the crew member who got the cart was the first link in that chain of custody. Then the witness becomes the second. They also point out that the crew member is now behind the tape. The witness said he wasn't allowed within the tape anymore after they secured the crime scene. But the defense plays another clip where this crew member reaches over the tape, grabs the dummy round to shake it, and then the defense asks the witness, why didn't you tell him to stop breaching that parameter? He says, I don't know. The defense gets the witness ultimately to say that was an investigative mistake on his part. They talk about the crime scene log where people sign in and out. The defense asked if that man is on the log, the crew member that shook the dummy round. The witness doesn't know. He asked the log get started as soon as other deputies showed up. They showed that the log was started at 2:38 p.m. That was about 30 minutes after the witness arrived. He said, of course, it should have been started sooner, but it was an active scene. There's only 3 deputies. The defense asked if, as the scene supervisor, he was concerned that this crew member reached over and got something off the cart, and maybe could that indicate he had done it before? The witness says, I don't know. He's asked what he did to make the gun safe, and he said he checked to be sure there were no projectiles in the cylinder. He said Hannah was asking the first assistant director where the ammo was, and the witness says he doesn't know where the ammo was. She was the one talking about that. He never asked where the ammo inside the gun went. I mean, I get the defense is doing their job and they're doing it well, but I don't know that this line of questioning is going to impact the jury very much, to be honest. You've got over 200 people on scene with 3 deputies at that point, and their hands were tied in a really big way. They had to prioritize, and you still have 2 injured on set. The defense point out there were a lot of cars on set and asked why they didn't instruct people to go wait in their cars and not talk to anyone. The witness said with the scene being so big, they tried to keep everybody in one spot to keep an eye on them. He also says he doesn't know where everyone's vehicles are. He said on a movie set, there are staging areas, and he doesn't know if there were staging areas that were elsewhere. The defense points out cars in the distance and asked if they could have sent them to those cars to wait. The witness says, look, it's far away. We would not have been able to control the scene, sending them there. On a redirect, the state's back up to kind of tie this up in a neat little bow before the witness gets off the stand. The prosecutor asked if he had any reason to think the man that shook the dummy round planted evidence, tampered with evidence, or anything of that nature. And he said, no, he would have noticed I was looking straight at the guy. The state asked if he owns the cars the defense is talking about. Obviously, the witness says no. And he said, I can't place witnesses in cars that I don't know who they belong to. The prosecution points out that his body cam is pointed in one direction. It doesn't show what the witness was looking at. Then the prosecution asks if the witness has any range of motion issues with his neck that would prohibit him from turning his neck back and forth. He says no. The witness says before the crime scene log was started, he was checking on everybody, the victims, and he just didn't have enough personnel to designate someone to do paperwork. The prosecution asked about the gun. He said Hannah was the one that handed it to him. There were no rounds in the cylinder when he received it. The next witness is Marissa Popple. She is a crime scene tech with the Santa Fe Sheriff's Office. She arrived on scene between 2 and 3 that day. She did fingerprint analysis on those live rounds. However, DNA was not done, and that's a standard across most labs. is such a small likelihood of getting enough skin cells to develop a DNA profile. If you remember, in the defense's opening statements, they talk about not getting the DNA off the projectiles. She collected items from the scene as well. And also, she was there when they executed a search warrant on the prop truck a week after the shooting. And then there was a search warrant at PDQ Warehouse in Albuquerque, New Mexico on November 30th of 2021. This is owned by Seth Kinney. Heard about him in openings, supplied those rounds that came to the set a couple of days after the FBI identified live rounds on set. What we're seeing here is the defense also is going to take the position some live rounds were accidentally sent to set, which resulted in this. The FBI obviously disputing that. The witness brings out the box of dummy rounds in the white box. At this point, the box has been cut. You can see fingerprint dust on it from the investigation. They bring out the foam projectile holder from the white box that held those rounds. It's empty now, but it did have multiple projectiles in there when it was collected. The prosecution takes out a dummy round, shakes it, lets the jury hear the sound, confirming that was a dummy round. They show a .45 dummy round that was deconstructed by the FBI. I'm going to put that up on screen now. This is a deconstructed .45 dummy round. This was done by the FBI. And what you see in that plastic container, there's a ball bearing. That's what makes the noise when that round is shaken. They show another dummy round that has a hole drilled in the side. That's another way to confirm it's a dummy round. Dummy rounds are either one or the other. Either there's a hole in the side and it doesn't rattle, or there's no hole with that ball bearing inside, which makes the noise. They show a live .45 round that was found inside the ammo box that had the dummy rounds. I mean, this is a huge no-no. Should have never been anywhere near that set. They go on to show a projectile with a silver primer and then a box of dummy ammo. The primers are copper colored, and they show several rounds of ammo that were found in the prop truck. There's just mixed ammo in there for different guns. They also show how the blanks are crimped on the tip. They show a photo of the gun that Baldwin was using, as well as a rifle. Now, that rifle was jammed and the projectiles in there were damaged. They actually had to take that rifle back to the sheriff's office to be able to unload it properly and safely. Then they show the prop cart. This is the Hot Mess Express, y'all. If you're not on YouTube, this cart is in disarray. There's stuff everywhere. There's guns, there's ammo. I don't know what else is on that cart. It just looks like things were thrown on there. You can really see through this line of questioning how this disaster happened so easily with the disorganization on this set. There were 2 live rounds, by the way, on that prop cart. They did find a spent .45 casing on that cart. It was sent to the FBI to determine if the projectile was shot from the gun Baldwin had. At a later date, a witness will testify to this. We don't know the answer to that yet. They also show a gun belt that was on top of the cart. That gun belt belonged to the actor Jensen Ackles. There was a live round on that belt. If you're on YouTube, I got that big red arrow pointing at it. You can also see how that primer is silver compared to the others, which are a little bit more of a gold color. Ultimately, on the prop cart, there was just a lot of loose ammo. There were 6 blanks with that crimped tip and the 2 live rounds. There were also some loose rounds found in a fanny pack on top of the prop cart. If you've ever had a fanny pack, you know there's like a million pockets on it, and pretty much every pocket had blank rounds. One pocket did have a dummy round with a hole in the side. Ultimately, she collected 255 dummy rounds from the set. Of those, 50 were not located in the proper place. They were just loose. She found loose rounds in the bottom of boxes, loose rounds on the floor of the prop truck. And she said pretty much any box that was located that held ammo, there was loose ammo underneath. Now, get this. On Alec Baldwin's belt, there was also a live round. The second projectile, if you're looking on YouTube, red arrow pointing to the bottom where the primer is and also to the tip. Very hard to distinguish between that being a live round and these other dummy rounds. All the live rounds they found had a silver primer. Remember, in the defense openings, they disputed that, saying that not all silver primers mean it's a live round. But in this case, all the live rounds that were collected did have that silver primer. They show boxes of ammunition from the prop truck, just a lot of loose rounds. At that point, testimony ended for the day. She's still on the stand on direct. So we will pick up with that tomorrow and see where else that goes. You really see how this was an accident, unfortunately, waiting to happen, which did, that cost a woman her life, traumatized a lot of people, injured the director. And you think about the people in that church, these are living victims. That's what I call people who witness traumatic things or lose someone they love. That image, that day, will never leave their mind. Tomorrow, I'm going to sum up the entire second day of testimony, much like I did today. It's going to be a very interesting case. We'll see where it goes from here. But in the meantime, I hope you guys have a good rest of your Saturday, and we'll see you soon.